So the first thing that I want to talk about, the first thing that to me struck me as I was like thinking about this issue is um when I look at the US and I look at the trend of the US, the amount of freedom that we've had, when I look at the amount of money that there used to be, and there still is, and when I look at where we are now, there's an obvious trend. This is not hard to find. You can go on to any YouTube or whatever and look this stuff up. They have videos about free range humans where we didn't have to ask to do absolutely everything, where we didn't need a license or a permit to do absolutely everything. Where I mean, very recently, so money, how much money we made. So in the 70s, the average income I think was around 36,000. Let's just call it $40,000 for argument's sake, right? To live that same lifestyle today, you have to make over $300,000 a year from the 70s. How many people do you know living that way? I don't know very many. I don't know very many people that level of income. They have a job that produces $25,000 a month. Their job. I'm not talking about their investments. I'm not talking about that stuff. I'm talking about their job. And if you think there's a lot of jobs like that, I want you to go ahead and head over to Indeed or Monster or Craigslist or anywhere you want. And I want you to find $300,000 jobs. Because I'll tell you right now, in the 70s, if you want to go find a $36,000 job, it wasn't that difficult. They were everywhere. That was middle of the road. Middle of the road. Okay. There is without a doubt a decline in what the average person makes for a living. Let's talk about what the wealthy make. I think it's something like 20,000 times their income. We can look up this is not hard either. You can Google this. I'm not interested in giving you the exact numbers. If somebody wanted to debate me about it, I'd be better prepared. I can tell you right now, the income of the wealthy, the income of CEOs of the top tier of professionals has gone through the roof. So while we're nowhere near making what the average worker used to make in the 70s, they are making 100 times what they used to make. All right. You want to take a look at so that's just income. Okay. That's income. We talked about freedom. We know what we have to have permits for. Now, listen, I'm not telling you that there doesn't need to be rules and regulations on a society. There obviously does. I think that's why places like the World Economic Forum, that I know a lot of people hate, talk a lot about regulation and basically studying where your movements are, what you're doing. I know in the outset that sounds horrible, but we are global now. You have to understand that. For those of you out there who say, I don't want to be microchipped, I don't want anybody tracking me. You might want people microchipped and tracking that are coming from all over the world into your neighborhood to snatch your kids, abuse your wife, steal your possessions. You might be interested in tracking then, right? I don't know. I'm just simply saying. So societies change as they grow. Yes, there is less freedom, and very rarely is it ever given back. What I always tell people is this about freedom: just be careful when you're giving up freedoms. I moved from Pennsylvania out to Vegas, Henderson, Nevada for about 18 months, and then on to Southern California. And there was a beach that my wife used to go to. My wife and I used to go to all the time in Leucadia, North County. And when we first got there, you were allowed to camp on that beach. You take your dogs to the beach, have a fire on the beach. I mean, you're allowed to do whatever you wanted. And then we showed up one morning and there was a sign that said, no camping overnight, like no tents on the beach. And I thought, well, that's pretty reasonable because it's not like there was this giant homeless population or anything, but there are people that would be sleeping on the beach. You get up to surf in the morning and some of them would still be awake. So I was like, right, that's fine. And then it turned into no tents on the beach at all, which sort of stinks for a guy like me who protects himself from the sun a little bit. Blonde hair, blue eyes. Well, not blonde, but a sandy brown, blue eyes. And so that was gone. I was like, okay. And then it said, no fires on the beach unless in a fire pit. Okay, that's fine. You showed up. No more fires on the beach. All right. Then it said no more dogs on the beach. without a leash. That you show up and then it says just no more dogs on the beach. Now, I never showed up and one of those things was given back. Never. They don't do that. So what I will tell you is guard your freedoms very carefully. Be very careful what you're willing to trade for safety. Be very, very careful. Okay. Now there are people that can give up their freedoms very easily because they're not giving anything up. In this world, money is freedom. And if you have a lot of it, whether you earned it, whether you're born into it, whatever, you have a lot more freedom than everyone else. And if you don't know that, then you didn't earn that money. Your freedom is thousands of percent higher than someone born into poverty. You have no idea the freedom you have. As somebody that was born into abject poverty, very poor, very broke, knows what it's like to be hungry, grew up in a trailer. I can tell you that the freedom money gets you is something that you can never understand unless you've not had it. And there's plenty of people who don't have money and then do have money and they never go back. It's why some of the most successful people in the world, they're a very, very tiny, tiny percentage. I would almost call them a carrot on the stick if you watch my other videos. People that come from poverty to get wealthy, they never look back. They don't care if they have to work 16 hours a day, 20 hours a day, it doesn't matter to them. They'll do whatever it takes to keep that money. Why? Because they're greedy and they love Ferraris? No, because the freedom that comes with that money is so important. So we just discussed how the average man is living in the US as compared to not that long ago. That's only 50 years ago. That's nothing. So if there's any Gen Zers out there that think 50 years is a lifetime ago, I get it. You're 20, you're 25. You think that's a lifetime ago. Trust me, you get to my age of 44 and you're a fucking boomer. That's not a lifetime ago. 50 years is nothing. And in fact, I was born in the 70s. So eek, I'm also old. Okay, so we talked about income for the average person, and we've talked about freedom. We have all seen our freedoms depleted. We've all seen our income depleted. Cost of housing. Well, I don't think you're going to get any argument out of anyone there. And also, what about home ownership? What percentage of people own homes as compared to the 70s? My goodness. I don't know what the percentage that has plummeted since the 70s, but it's a high number, right? Home ownership in the 70s, I can tell you this for a fact. My parents and grandparents, they all own, well, no, later in life, my mother had owned a home. But she also didn't work very hard. So, that's tough. Home ownership in the 70s was very, 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 very attainable. All right. I realized that was in the industrial era when you could work automotive, you could work in steel. We were the industrial nation. So I understand all that. I get it. I know there's differences. Point being, home ownership now, if you think you're going to own a home by going and getting a job and saving your pennies, well, they have funny videos up about 20% of your earnings goes to savings and 10% to investments and 50% to your bills. Well, you need to have the income to even do that, and most people do not. So home ownership nowadays is a very, very difficult thing. It is becoming far, 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 far more difficult to achieve. I'm not going to say that it does not. So some people would say, what about technology? It makes it easier to make more money. If technology makes it so much easier to make more money, riddle me this. Why aren't people making more money? Someone explain that to me. Technology has made it so much more easy to build a business, and you can learn skills. And in the outset, you can say cool things on the internet like, listen, what you do is you find yourself a skill that pays $1 million a year, that you can go out and do this and make some money. You get the skill and then you sell it. This is a great clip and absolutely ridiculous. They say that it takes 10,000 hours, which is the equivalent of 10 years, to become a master of something. Okay? 10 years before you're able to even potentially sell something that's going to make you $1 million and $1 million a year. I love how that's just thrown around like it's so easy, because some lucky carrot made it. And I don't even know if it's a lucky carrot, because the truth is, you don't know who these people are. I don't know who these people are. Right now, I can tell you that there's a ladder in life. It's how I always refer to life. And there's rungs on this ladder, and you climb this ladder. Now, I'm sure a lot of you have seen a lot of those memes on the internet, where it'll show like a big long ladder and tiny steps, and then a big long ladder with these giant steps. And it is basically telling you, take tiny steps and you'll get there. Try to take big steps, and it'll be very difficult. The problem with that meme is that you don't get to design the steps. Not now. You don't get to design how wide those rungs are. You don't. You don't get to decide what it costs to purchase a home. You don't get to decide what rent is. You don't get to decide what average median income is. You don't get to decide anything. And while they're going to tell you that being an entrepreneur is going to get you there, and I would agree with them, by the way, it's all I've ever done my entire life. I was a financial planner, wealth advisor, financial advisor, broker. Those are all the same thing, by the way. But I've always been an entrepreneur. I ran my own company inside of a decade of doing that job, ran my own company for 10 years. But let me tell you something. First off, to start your own business, the depths of brokenness that you will explore and uncomfortable brokenness. See, when you're an entrepreneur, you don't get to choose when you go broke. And I'll get into that in another conversation, but I'm telling you that for the average person to go be an entrepreneur is just not going to happen. Not in this day and age. It's just not going to, because it's really, really difficult to make money. If you think selling a product is easy, and I mean like a service, right? I'm not talking about selling shoes or shirts, which, by the way, all of these little micro Amazon sellers that were really brokering from wholesale, from like Alibaba or wherever they were buying their stuff, they were driving prices higher. So some of the people out there with these Amazon stores are part of the reason that we do experience higher prices now, because they're brokering, they're middling you, they're just driving costs up with no real benefit, because they're all doing drop shipping. But here's the point: you're selling a service. If you're selling a service, I would ask you to do one thing. If you think you're going to be able to sell your service for 1 week, I want you to try to give it away. 1 week. Go give it away. If being an entrepreneur is easy and all you do is acquire a skill and then go sell it to someone to make $1 million a year, I want you to go acquire a skill, whatever skill you want, and I want you to give it away. You won't be able to. You won't be able to. The level of knowledge you'll attain in acquiring that skill in a year or 6 months, especially these little courses that people are taking now, that think somehow that's going to produce this whirlwind economic windfall for them. It's ridiculous. You won't be able to give your skill away. So we can agree that technology has not made making money easier. It's made learning easier if you'd like to learn. Learning is fun. I love learning, but learning has nothing to do with money. The smartest people in the the smartest people in the world, they don't make the most money. Money and knowledge, money and learning, money and education, very little to do with one another. And that's why I wanted to talk about all these economic systems. I want to talk about who really gets rewarded in economic systems, because all of them. It isn't the brightest and the best. I don't know if you've noticed the political leaders around the globe, but they're not the brightest and the best those countries have to offer. Any country has to offer. So we can agree that education doesn't help us. So we're talking capitalism. I'm going to circle back around to where we were. So technology hasn't made making money easier. That's why the median income is so low, and that's why the cost of living is so high. We can agree that freedom has been slowly taken away, right? We're on a certain trajectory. We're on a certain path. Now, how long has Europe existed? How long has the Middle East existed? China, Russia. How long have they existed? Well, a hell of a lot sooner and a hell of a lot older than 1776. I mean, a lot of these places you can read about in the Bible. BC, right? So these places are thousands of years old. All of them. They're thousands of years old. How old are we? We're not even 300 years old. Like 250 years old. We're a little shy of that. You think there's a reason that maybe we have a little more freedom than them? Maybe there's a reason that the top 1% of 1% of 1% of 1% of our population doesn't own everything and we're all just a bunch of paupers. You think that that's possible? It has to do with time. If we're 250 years old and they're 1,000 years old and we're on a trajectory where the rich are getting richer, the rest of us are getting poorer, costs are going up so high that we can't afford anything. Now they can. They're buying bigger yachts. You have guys that built huge companies flying around Earth in spaceships shaped like dicks. And I have to think that that was somewhat on purpose. I think maybe Jeff Bezos was sending a message no one's aware of. Or that could just be me putting on rose-colored glasses. I have no idea. But when you fly around Earth in a spaceship that's shaped like a dick, and you're making one of the biggest dick moves and dick statements I've ever seen in my life, I have to think that they're connected. Maybe they're not. I have no idea. But gosh, I don't know. I am just not built to believe that someone would actually do that. But maybe he did. So we're on the same trajectory as them. I think there's a possibility that we're just younger. Because that's what I think. That's what I think. What happened in those societies, what happened over there, is the same thing that goes on here. First, they probably started off pretty darn fair. Then there starts to become some separation in wealth. Then, obviously, the society gets bigger and bigger. You have to have a government. You have to have politicians. Ultimately, what's happened here is we've taken our corporations. They've grown to such a size and they have so much money that they were able to buy off the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court ruled that a company is the same thing as a man, which made me throw up in my mouth just now. That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. Now those corporations can buy the politicians that pass the laws because they pay them off. And the rest of us are going to be doomed to serfdom. So the best thing you can do is become a CEO of one of those corporations. And the way to do that is go to a school that you've probably absolutely never even heard of. The schools you have heard of aren't as meaningful as you think. And then where do you think we end up 100 years from now? So in the last 50 years, the common man's lifestyle has shrunk into oblivion. There's no doubt about that. Anybody can look that up. I'd be happy to go over the numbers with anyone if they wanted to. It's not difficult. We have Google. As I just said, learning and educating yourself is one thing technology is good for. That and making you work 24/7 to think that it's a carrot. It's a great carrot. Love the carrot. Great. So that's capitalism. That's where we're at. Let's look at capitalism right now. So capitalism has obviously made the rich richer, the poor poorer. It put the money of that economy into the hands of few. And those few aren't even really men anymore. They're companies. And it creates a political ruling class that really thinks they can do and act and say whatever they want. But you can see that every single day. It created a media organization, news media organization that is really nothing more than propaganda. If you go over and watch one of my videos on media, you can see that they legitimately say the exact same things. They obviously follow a narrative. So we have a system filled with propaganda, a political ruling class. We're run by corporations, which is run by men. Any freedoms are slowly being taken away. What's socialism do? Now, socialism did it faster under Lenin and Stalin in Russia. It did it much quicker. I think it did it much quicker. I don't know. Because the truth is, if I look at our last 50 years, I don't know how far away from that we are. What if I take what happened last 50 years and then I add another 50%, right? Because 1917, Lenin kind of took over, and then the collapse of Russia was what, like 92 or 91 or something like that, where they tore the wall down. 70 some years. we're about 50 years in from the point that I was telling you. How long does it take before we are in serfdom? And then also what you could ask yourself is, do we have a ruling class the same that these other systems have? So how about the Saudi royal family? Well, we can argue that they actually have a lot more money. Like they're serfs, they're peasants. They have a lot less money than their royalty. I mean, the royalty are so bored. They build gold cars. They build platinum, like where it's made of gold. I mean, you're just bored. You like that's not a fulfilling life. I know that looks like a great picture. That sucks. If you're building gold cars and platinum cars and you are just, that life sucks. But that's also those are the oldest civilizations on the planet. That's where it all started. And so they're there. And then you take like somewhere that's still pretty darn old, but maybe not as old as them, like China, right? Like that's a very, very old society. China, Japan there. What's it like over there? Well, they actually have or at least on paper, what we're told, a booming middle class. But I will also tell you that their media is in far more control of them and their government's in far more control of them. I don't know how much we actually see. I have no idea. But I would say that would be the next place. Then you'd have Russia and then Europe being one of the, I mean, it's an old society, but a heck of a lot newer than the Middle East. All of these places are worse off than us in varying degrees. Some of them are royalty, some of them are communist, some of them are socialist, some of them are a republic, quote unquote, like Europe, a democracy, where they've actually done something really, really amazing in Europe, because the average person over in Europe will tell you that or at least I've heard this quite a bit from quite a few people. Maybe it's just my experience, but it's not that they dislike Europe, but they don't want to be like their wealthy ruling class over there. They dislike them immensely. They don't even want to take part in that class system anymore. That's a great trick right there. I mean, can you imagine sitting on your yacht watching like Monaco on your your helicopter sitting behind you, you're eating like caviar or something, and then you got some guy in a pub pounding beers like I don't want to be anything like them. Fuck them. Blah blah blah. I got my football. It's like, man, you have pulled off a hell of a scam there. So anyway, I'm digressing and shooting off into a new direction, which I do a lot of. So this is my argument. Of all the things we just talked about, is capitalism the greatest? It doesn't look like it to me. It just looks like another system. It looks like another system going down the same path all the other economic systems have gone down. I think that if you take the best of the best from all of these economic systems, then you can create a system that's great. Because one thing that China does do is they've eliminated patent law, for example. This has allowed them to technologically advance far quicker than we have because they don't have patents standing in the way. If you can make a better product and sell it on the open market and it sells, you're allowed to, and you don't get sued for it. Whereas here, that's not the case. You're absolutely going to get sued for it. So there's something out of there that seems to be pretty darn tremendous. And they are sort of a blended system. To some degree, they are a blended system. What is great about capitalism? Well, capitalism in its purest form is a market without interference, is a market that decides what the consumer wants. So in our system, because we are so ruled over by the governing class, by the political class, and by those that control the political class, everything is slowed down, but it still works. So for example, everything is slowed down, almost ground to a halt. People are finally realizing that the food that we eat here has so much preservatives and is so messed with that it actually makes you sick. That's why when you compare packaging, and this is pretty popular on social media right now, labels, when you compare the labels of European countries to the labels of US companies' food, they give me the exact same food. We'll have 100 more list of ingredients than them because we're packing it so much with preservatives. So what's happening in the US is finally people are buying organic off the shelves. They're finally looking for things that don't have laundry lists of preservatives in them. So what's happening? Every market, and I can tell you because I attempt to eat this way, although I cheat a lot. They're finally going and buying it. So you're seeing more of it on the shelves. You're seeing a lot more of this stuff on the shelves. That's just food, right? Electric cars, obviously there was a small draw for them. Now there's a larger draw. Every car maker is making these electric cars. Doesn't really matter why or if it makes sense or any of that. There is obviously consumer demand, so more of them are made. That's the beauty of capitalism. That is the beauty of it. I think all of the economic systems we just talked about, they don't reward the brightest and the best, because the truth is the best marketer and the best advertiser is going to win every single time. Your product doesn't have to be that good, but if you can make it look cool, maybe you have some access to celebrities that will help you make it look cool, that's it. I mean, I can tell you I use Apple products and I've used Android products in the past. There's nothing special about Apple products. Oh, you click once instead of twice and silly things, but they made it cool. That's it. They made it cool. Better marketing, better advertising. The other people that get to win in most of the societies we're talking about now, most of these economic situations, are the biggest narcissists. You see, if you don't mind trampling your fellow man to get to the top and you don't feel bad about it, you have a real good shot at being a really wealthy person. You do. You're not afraid to bend the rules. You don't care who you put out of business. None of that matters to you. You are climbing the economic ladder, right? There's a comedian, I forget who it is, and I don't want to take credit for it, but they were talking about the politics in the US. And it probably was on Rogan, as a matter of fact. So you can probably look this up. They said that politics was the Olympics of narcissistic psychopaths. And I thought, wow, a truer statement's never been made. A truer statement has never been made. But there's some businessmen out there at the highest levels of business. You're definitely competing in the Olympics for narcissistic psychopaths as well. And then some not. So I have a video that talks about different ways to achieve success. That is one of them. I mean, and a lot of times when you get to the top of these societies, that's what you find. That's why there's videos out there that we'll talk about. I saw a video that was talking. It was this guy from Africa, some African leader. I don't know who he was. And somebody put this up to make fun of the US. It said US is talking about gender equality and transgenderism and all this woke stuff. And they want to give us money to do this type of work in our country, when Russia and China are offering us weapons and ammunition. And so we're going to deal with them. And somebody from the US put that up as a shining example of why we should be dealing in guns and ammunition and not wokeness. Now, look, everything can get taken too far, but let me tell you something. We don't need to deal in guns and ammunition anymore. This stuff, if we're going to be a real world leader, we got to get away from this crap. I mean, look, as every species on Earth evolves, it becomes more intelligent, more peaceful, and it helps its fellow animals, so to speak, right? I do have a video on nature too that talks a lot about, reptilians until us, reptiles until us, and go watch it if it interests you. But basically, evolution makes you a more peaceful human being. So if we're going to evolve, we need to start heading in that direction. We don't need more guns and more war. I mean, the last thing we need is the ruling classes of all these different economic societies setting the poor off to kill each other so they can get cheaper oil or better wheat or more cobalt or whatever the heck they're going after. All right, so I'm going to end it there. So I wanted to explore that a little bit. I'm probably going to talk about this a lot more. I actually had about 1 million thoughts as I was going through this conversation. I hope you liked it. I hope I didn't ramble too much. But yeah, I think I'm going to talk a lot more about this. I got about 100 more questions and just talking. All right, I hope you enjoyed. Thanks a lot. We'll see you next time.